Kudelski has been involved in creating trust in the digital world for more than 30 years. We started doing that in the pay TV space, where when you send satellite signals through the air, you don't know who's going to receive them. And so you have to be able to create a trusted device like a set-top box that receives those signals and then has trusted credentials on the set-top box that determine what you can see and what you can't see. So we've been doing that for some of our customers for more than 30 years, continuously, and have had to be in an environment where we were constantly under attack. Our technology was that we had to then actively defend. So trust is not only establishing trust at the beginning, it's managing the security life cycle of any service or product to make sure that it's maintained throughout its entire life cycle. So trustworthy digital space for us is actually our DNA, and now doing it also in the IoT world uses a lot of those very same concepts that we created in the digital TV space and pioneered.
Is there like one chief of trust or one digital trust officer in Kudelski, or is everyone chief of trust within the organization? Whose responsibility is it to keep that ethos alive?
The truth is, I don't think it's anyone's responsibility because it's everyone's responsibility, and it's just core to our DNA. I think it might be worth noting that we're probably unlike any other digital trust, label holder, because all of the ones that you've been auditing are offering an end service to the customer, and they want to be able to prove that that service is trustworthy. We sell the services and the technology to create trust for them and others. So, we're a trust enabler as opposed to a trust implementer. And as a result of that, the answer to your question is, everyone in the company is responsible for it. And it's just who we are.
It's actually part of your business model. Without trust, what would Kudelski be?
That's just what we sell.
How can you sell something that is not easy to grasp?
There's several different reasons why people buy into trust. One of them is because there's a business model involved that depends on it. So, for instance, in the pay TV space, if you can't control what people can see, you can't get them to pay for it. If it's freely available, then they don't pay. So our job has always been to create that trusted, controllable environment where if someone wants something of value, that they have to pay for it. So that's the business model is one reason why trust needs to be established. Privacy is another reason why trust has to be established. Protecting information, either because it belongs to me as a consumer, and it can do harm to me if it gets out, or because it belongs to a company and it's strategic and confidential and could do harm to them if it gets out. And then I think one of the last and most important emerging reasons for trust is that regulation is starting to require it more and more. So in places where people haven't been willing to invest in trust as heavily as they should, now regulation is saying, hey, listen, it's important for you to do this. You have to do this in order to protect consumers, in order to protect businesses, in order to protect critical infrastructure as well. And I think that's really going to be the theme of 2023 is in IoT, at least, is IoT cybersecurity regulation requiring a lot better job of establishing trust.
How would you define trust?
Trust is the end result that we're trying to create. Security is the way. So if I'm a consumer involved in, in our case, in an IoT ecosystem, my expectations are that no one will be able to control my device except for me. No one will be able to download new software onto my device without my permission or that's malicious in some way. My data will be safe. If I'm a company involved in that ecosystem, then I expect to be able to monetize my product and services. And if someone doesn't pay, I can turn them off. Simple things like that. Or if it's a new use case, business model, like pay per use. And if I, for instance, my Roomba today, I pay per month for vacuuming as a service. And if I stop paying, they turn off my Roomba, right? So that has to be part of the trusted ecosystem that security helps achieve and to meet all those expectations.
Yeah, you said trust is the ability to meet critical expectations of all parties involved in an ecosystem. How would you feel about me adding in the word continually meet the expectations?
The word that we tend to use is throughout its entire life cycle. Because we look at, unlike a lot of other companies that treat trust as a one and done. So I created a product, I put in my best effort, knowing what I knew at the time, and out it goes, and I'm done with it, and I move on to the next thing. What's inherent to Kudelski's definition of trust is managing it throughout the entire life cycle of the product. And because circumstances in the environment are constantly changing. So we refer to it as the threat landscape in security. And because it's constantly evolving, we have to constantly evolve, which means another important part of trust is, or I guess more of security, is establishing secure foundations by design from the beginning that allow you to continuously evolve and reestablish trust over time. And this means some very concrete things. It means making sure each device has a unique, immutable, unclonable identity. So you know who you're talking to, and you know who's talking to you. Being able to continuously update the security of the device, and being able to enforce that the device is up to a certain security level or software version, or otherwise you can close it out of your system because you know it's going to be vulnerable.
Okay, so either you can guarantee that, and if you're at a point where you can no longer guarantee that, you still have the control of turning it off entirely.
Yeah. And that's a fundamental part of what keySTREAM enables, is everything from allowing a device onto a network to saying, okay, I haven't been able to update you. You haven't allowed it. So therefore, I'm going to revoke your credentials and we no longer trust you. keySTREAM for any company really then becomes the foundation of their entire IoT ecosystem for creating, maintaining, and revoking trust over time.
And why was it important for you to have the service audited?
We're constantly telling our customers that an independent third-party analysis of their products is what will make them successful in the long term. And we do that for them. So it was critical for us to allow our system also to be audited externally. Having an independent view of what you've done is critical to the quality and integrity of what you've built. And we've always believed in that 100%. And we're very happy to open our doors to digital trust, to validate what we already knew, but we're willing to receive feedback on if we've missed something. We're actually doing that constantly internally as well.
Oh, okay.
By having different teams. I mean, it's a fundamental concept of IT development and software and hardware development to have separate development and testing teams, so that when the testers are testing what's been created, there's no pride involved and saying, hey,
Mm-hmm.
I built this and I don't want to admit that I made a mistake.
Like, how does it happen? Is this a part of the process, or does this happen sporadically? Would I as a project manager then say, hey, let's evaluate this service? Or
Well, so we have a IoT security lab in Switzerland that had its foundations in investigating and analyzing pirate products that were trying to attack our customers. And then we started using that independent expertise we had internally to analyze our own products. And then once we built up enough expertise in doing that, we started selling that as a service to third parties as well. So we can help them assess their threats, which is a paper exercise to understand what might go wrong and what the business impact would be. Once you know that, then you can do a security architecture for a product or service where, understanding those threats, you can make sure that you build something that will mitigate them and protect against them. Then we provide fundamental technologies to help people create secure ecosystems like keySTREAM. And then when everything's said and done, we can take their device and associated services into our labs and jump up and down on them and break them and shoot lasers at them and put them under a scanning electron microscope and use all the millions of dollars of toys that we have at our disposal to find out if there are any critical security gaps that they'll want to fix before they go to market.
Sounds like a fun place, actually.
Yeah, it's a very interesting place. It's when you get a guided tour, because of course that's the only way that you can see it is with our security staff. It's really interesting to see and hear about also some of the use cases of where we've helped customers discover issues that could have been catastrophic to their business, and we've helped them prevent them so that trust in their product and in their brand name remains.
So you mentioned that you have ways to assess different threats. Do you have your own criteria catalog, or how would that work? Is it with those tools? Or?
So we use what we call a TARA, a threat and risk analysis, is primarily a paper exercise where we do use some pretty standard industry criteria. And I'm just going to look it up real quick to make sure I've got the right name.
So that would be questions like, for example, which third-party services do you use that you have no control over the data,
exactly.
for
Things
example?
like that.
Okay.
But then it's also a very specific dive down into finding out whether there's any threats related to spoofing. So what would happen if someone tried to impersonate something or someone else? What would happen in those situations? Tampering. What would happen if someone modified the data or the code? Repudiation. So what would happen if someone was claimed not to have performed an action? Like they said, I didn't send that email, and you needed to be able to say, I certainly know that you sent that email. Information disclosure. So exposing information to someone not authorized to see it. What would happen if that happened? Denial of service. So what would happen if a website was crashed or they absorbed too much CPU time or something like this. And then last, elevation of privilege. So what would happen if someone gained capabilities without the proper authorization? And this is called the STRIDE model that's from Microsoft. So spoofing, tampering, repudiation, information disclosure, denial of service, elevation of privilege. These are the categories that we primarily look at when we do a threat analysis, as well as just listening to the customer about what keeps you up at night. What are you most scared of? What would bring down your business if it happened? And then how can we protect against that as the next step? And those are all the things that you need to know to be able to do good security design.
Mm-hmm.
Because with security, you're never trying to build Fort Knox. You're simply trying to protect against the things that are likely to happen.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like in Arizona, I'm not going to build a flood wall around my house.
So you were audited for 35 criteria in our catalog,
Yes.
and we categorized them into four areas. So that's security, data protection, reliability, and fair user interaction. So I'm just wondering, how did you ensure that keySTREAM was developed as a trustworthy digital service, and who was part of that discussion, and what works especially well for you? Maybe walk me through the process from beginning of like first idea to final product.
You mean in terms of keySTREAM?
Yes.
Yeah. So we've been doing encryption, key management, embedded hardware for 35 years, mostly in the pay TV context. About 6 or 7 years ago now, I think, our management was looking at the Internet of Things, which was rising quickly as a phenomenon. And now we don't think of it so much as the Internet of Things. We just think of it as connected devices, because it's more and more normal every day. Everything is connected. My oven over there is connected. My connected smartwatch, even my reverse osmosis water filter and my water softener are connected to the internet. So connection always provides value, but it also provides risk with it as well. So we realized these systems need to be protected just as much as pay TV signals needed to be protected. And that in fact, the fundamental technology that we developed over those 30 plus years was very applicable to this. Because again, it's all about how do I establish trust? And so we began taking some of our core technologies and building keySTREAM around the ideas that we need to protect a device from being attacked. We need to protect the data. We need to protect access to the device and the data. And then we need to ensure that that ecosystem is protected over time. So the security lifecycle part of it. So those were sort of the four fundamental foundations of how we built this, was protection of device, data, access, and lifecycle. We built it as really an all singing, all dancing system capable of doing all these things for anyone. And what we found out is that people perceive that as complex. And what they're doing is to really try and achieve specific objectives that they have. For instance, how can I do secure firmware over-the-air updates of my devices where the software that's being offered to the device can be proven to be 100% trustworthy, as opposed to, for instance, malware from a hacker. So now we're building more of our own services on top of keySTREAMs to do things like that. Another one, for instance, is in-field provisioning. When you've got a PC, it's pretty easy to get it onto a network and set up trust between the device and the network. But when you're talking about video cameras or connected microwaves or anything else that's connected copy machines, et cetera, that's a little bit more challenging, because how do you establish the identity of those things and then get them onto a network in a way that's trusted? You can ask your copy machine manufacturer, hey, can you please, along with my copiers, give me a bunch of files with all the keys for these copy machines that I can upload to my network, so I know there's a trusted relationship between the copier and the network. But that's prone to a lot of mistakes and human error, and is not really building a system that's trustworthy by design. So the other really amazing thing that keySTREAM is doing is we built a system for in-field provisioning where the second the copy machine arrives in the building, it announces itself to the network. The network says to keySTREAM, hey, I got this guy who says that he should be trustworthy. Should I believe him or not? And keySTREAM says, oh, okay, here's a unique identity for this device, which then gets passed on to the device. Here, network is that identity. Now the two of you can trust each other. So providing sort of trust as a service.
It's almost like giving that device an ID. So it becomes a citizen of this network that you've created.
Exactly. It's creating a community of trust, but rather than doing it at the beginning of the chain where then that copy machine has to go from, the chips that go into the copy machine to the copy machine manufacturer to the distributor who's going to sell it to you and then to you with the little briefcase. I have a video on this that I can send you, by the way, that the little briefcase with keys has to go all the way along the way. And sometimes it gets lost and sometimes it goes to the wrong place and stuff like that. So we believe that establishing trust at the end of the chain unburdens everyone from having to do the little, suitcase with keys lugging across the process and makes it easier for people to establish trust when it's needed.
Yeah, I guess for you or for Kudelski in general, like this is so much, the whole process is so different compared to other organizations where some person along the way has to think, oh no, we have to make this secure. Like where security and trust is just another to-do on their list.
What we're trying to do is to teach people that it can be an amazing business enabler for them. For instance, is if you have trust between you and a device, then it makes things possible. Like, for instance, that copy machine, you don't have to sell to a customer. You can sell it to them as copier as a service, and they pay per page. And the end customer can't tamper with the page count because the security in the system is strong enough to prevent that. And you can also then prove back to the customer beyond any shadow of a doubt, this is exactly how many pages you printed, not one more, not one less. There's no way anyone could have tampered with that. Even the company couldn't have tampered with it to charge the customer more. So you get trust from both sides in a situation. One of the other services that we do for customers to maintain trust is, a lot of companies are using third-party components in their devices and even in software. So get this DLL library from here, get this API from there. And we run a service for our customers where we catalog all of their different components in their software. And then we monitor on a monthly basis what known vulnerabilities and threats there are to those individual components. And then we go back to the customer and say, hey, we've detected 3 different places in your software where there could be a problem and you need to do an update. So that's part of the ongoing security lifecycle management. So we plan, design, implement, test, and manage security over time. Matter, M-A-T-T-E-R. It's a new standard that's coming out in consumer electronics that creates security and interoperability between devices in a home. And that's a great example of how Kudelski operates. We are going to be deeply involved in Matter because of the fact that it's got security at its foundation, and we're such experts in enabling security for customers. They have established a way for every Matter certified device to receive a certificate of trust from a trust authority, of which we will be one.
Wow.
But if you think about it, pretty much any company can sit there and create a bunch of certificates and hand them out for cost.
Absolutely.
So the way we're really going to position ourselves and the way we're naturally best at what we do is when we take the customer by the hand from beginning to end and say, okay, you're going to create this new device. There are going to be threats to it. which are going to create threats to your business and to your reputation. Let's work together from the beginning, step by step, to make sure that you successfully avoid all of those threats so that your business case is going to be successful. So we'll not just give you a certificate, we'll help you make sure that you design a device that's secure by design, that you understand your threats, that it's been tested, by one of the most thorough labs in the world, that you know what you need to fix, and that perhaps, we monitor the ongoing security of that on a regular basis. So that's where we believe we are going to be highly differentiated compared to anyone else in the Matter ecosystem that's providing certificates, is that, we're not just going to toss you certificates over the fence and make you pay. We're going to make sure that what you're building is going to have a long life, that your reputation is going to be protected, and that you're going to earn the money that you expected to earn.
Maybe with all that, do you feel like the global discourse around digital trust and security has changed?
So security providers like us and others, I think, have always predicted that there would be a point where there were so many catastrophic breaches and horrible stories of people hacking into cars that got driven off the road, that people would wake up and realize how important security is. Little stories like that happen on a daily basis still, but they haven't reached a level where people are waking up enough to realize how important this is in most industries.
Okay.
And the other factor is that the competition in so many industries is so stiff that the pace of innovation is very fast. And the last thing that anyone wants is to be slowed down by something that is speculative in nature. And security, by its nature, is always protecting against the possible risks and the possible unknowns.
Yeah.
And people don't like to do that. They like, to say, okay, I need to create this functionality that the customer is going to want and get it out the door as fast as possible. So, the two things that will change that is if the pace of breaches and things like that becomes much more visible, if there are catastrophic failures in well-known systems that create tangible harm. But the other major thing that we talked about earlier for 2023 is, I think, governments, they do see the threat. Industry associations see the threat, and they're stepping in and saying, no, we have to create standards and have minimum set of expectations to guarantee trust in these new ecosystems, because, as is always the case, their role is to protect us against our own, laziness and ignorance, and make sure that we're doing the right thing, to protect. Let's call it the digital environment, right? It's almost like how so many people have differing opinions about protecting the Earth's environment. Some of them don't see the problem. Some of them do. And the digital environment is the same. There are problems. There are things happening in the background that people eventually are not going to like. And we need to get ahead of it now.
Yeah. So the discourse or the general discussion or acceptance of those topics hasn't really changed yet in the general sphere, but governments and industry associations, they do see the threats. They do realize that this needs to.
It is already starting to change somewhat, and that's why we see the increase in demand for things like in-field provisioning and secure firmware over-the-air downloads.
Where does that demand come from? Is it the consumer, or is it?
I think it's both, consumers and corporate buyers and government buyers who are anticipating both increased risk and increased regulation.
If you led the whole discourse on digital trust, digital security, what topic would you like to discuss more or talk about more?
So this isn't relevant to a pure IT environment, but it is relevant, of course, to any IoT environment, and that's security by design. And security by and it's interesting. Maybe just a tiny bit of background. Even when we started, we really didn't understand the nature of quote unquote IoT security, because 98% of the world was looking at it from the perspective of how do I protect my network against uncontrolled devices? So they were really seeing IoT security as a cybersecurity problem. So if no one's doing security right in the devices, then I can expect them potentially to attack my network, and I have to protect against that. So, our group company, Kudelski Security, is a pure cybersecurity company that helps companies do things like that. So within our group of companies, we have that covered on that side. Within Kudelski IoT, our perspective is, how do we help companies create devices that won't be a threat to networks in the first place? So we solve the problem at the source instead of fighting it after the fact. The cost of doing it the right way the first time is $1. The cost of fixing it after the fact is going to be $60 to $80. Or 60 to 80 million. And this is research done by IBM some time ago, specifically in the software space.
Wow.
about bugs.
Yeah.
So, our ethos has always been get it right the first time. Right? So that's what security by design is all about.
Do you see any trends emerging in the space?
Yes.
Which ones?
End customers and device manufacturers are increasingly expecting their semiconductor manufacturers, so chip manufacturers, the very beginning of the whole value chain for creating a device, right, is the chips. That's where the fundamental building blocks start. They're placing expectations on them to solve the security problem.
On the chip manufacturers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the chip manufacturers are perfectly capable of doing that, except their business model has always been create the chip, get it out the door in as high a volume as you possibly can, make your money, then move on to the next product, and not offer services or ongoing security or key management or anything on top of those solutions. So our objective this year has been to partner with chipset manufacturers to give them everything that they need to embed a security, what we call a secure enclave or secure IP within their chip that we can then take over and manage for the customer going forward. We can use that as the solid foundation for establishing unique identity, managing that identity over time, rotating the keys, managing the keys, and then using all of that for data encryption, authentication, firmware over-the-air downloads, secure in-field provisioning, all of these services built on top of that secure foundation. And that's proving to get a lot of traction, where we can now partner with the chipset manufacturers who do what they do best, which is to create, insane, ever shrinking, amazing sets of functionality that enable all these toys that we love to play with in our lives. but have us take over the security lifecycle management part on behalf of the end customer who's using that.
Yeah, so it almost sounds like there's a shift happening in the perception of people using devices away from a shift in responsibility. It's not just the producer's fault or the customer's responsibility in order to keep devices safe. It's also the chip manufacturers.
Well, if you look at it in the pay TV space, it would have been easy for a set-top box manufacturer to say, I'm going to do my own security, and I'm going to offer that to all the pay TV operators. And indeed, some of them tried that and sort of failed. And that's why having a security expert and a specialist in the ecosystem who looks at the whole topic of security lifecycle management and all the features and functionalities that you can build on top of that is really critical, to have that abstracted away from not specific to this chip, not specific to this device, but rather a layer above all of that that can manage maybe many different chips and many different devices using one system. So, what was true in the pay TV world 30 years ago remains absolutely true in the IoT world today. And that's having a dedicated security partner and expert and provider really is critical to the success of the entire ecosystem.